Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Dennis Gishangi, Director Development at DUCIS. Very excited this new year. We are starting off with a bit of an introduction into Scrum. This is just an introduction. We'll be having a webinar that will be held on the 27th of February. So the next the coming 2 Wednesdays, we'll continue with the introduction. I'll do the PowerPoint introduction. And today we are looking at introducing Scrum, first by introducing project management, to explain what is a project, what is project management, so in project management, we start with a small joke. Anytime you conceive a project, there's usually great enthusiasm. This may be quickly followed by some disillusionment. Disillusionment can easily cause panic. In a team, the panic leads to the search of the guilty, that leads to the punishment of the innocent, and praise and honor for the non-participant. First, we look at what is a project. And as we look at what a project is, the definition of a project is basically a series of tasks that need to be completed in order to reach a specific outcome or vision or product. And within vision to product, there's a lot of input and output and activity to ensure that the product is conceived. I know Nairobi kuna projects kadhaa with various sponsorship, but the ones we want to look at now will be, let me give an example of going through school. School is among the projects almost everybody has undertaken at whatever level. So the vision is usually very simple, that you'd need to graduate with good grades. Most of the time, that will involve quite a bit of work individually and as a team. The product is usually the qualification and the knowledge in your head. Most of the time, the education has to be sponsored, even though it's government-sponsored or self-sponsored or sponsor-sponsored. And there's usually a management team involved to ensure all this succeeds. So everybody has done a project at some point in their life. The biggest difference is to understand not the project, but the management. How was that project managed? Many of the projects that are done would be done with what you'd call intuition, or using the underlying mechanism of operation. When you went to school, you didn't conceive it as a project unless you're doing a university self-sponsored project. That would then give you more need to understand the project intricacies. Project management is then the discipline that ensures that a vision can be achieved to a product. Now, if you look, so by definition, project management is a process to be able to lead a team to be able to achieve given goals within particular constraint of resource and time. And project management requires quite a bit of skill and know-how and experience, especially experience, to be able to know how to do that. On the picture, you're seeing some ants doing a project of crossing and carrying some food from one table to the other one. There must be a sort of leadership, organizational schematic to ensure this happens. So the first thing is the leadership. The second one is to manage the resource. Many of the projects would have cash resource, material resource, human resource. And the goal is always to be able to attain the vision. So like if the ants needed to cross over from one table to the other table, then that would be the vision they need to accomplish. So project management has been there from time in the beginning. The biggest project management area has been more in building houses. I believe my great-great-great-grandfather still used to be able to build traditional huts for the family to stay. They may not have gone to the complexities of doing a project plan and a feasibility study, but they managed to ensure the houses are built. Of the huge projects in the world that are old will be the ones they say the 7 wonders of the world, the pyramid, China Wall. To me, I'd add that people walking on the moon. The biggest thing you find, which is a common denominator with those, is they are all human resource intensive. People came up with those things. There was a lot of human labor involved, and there must have been some sort of organizational schematic to ensure that happened and was successful. So the big part of project management then comes to the process, and the most of the time is being able to understand the vision. When you understand the vision, being able to break down the vision in its various constituents, because most of the times, if you think of even a building, you can't just wake up and build it. You have to break down every constituent level that is necessary, and then be able to mobilize. So you'd have an understanding or design phase, or if it's a building, you'd do the feasibility economically, you do the design you do the architectural design, you'd break down to BQ, you'd draw a document of what needs to be done, who needs to supply what. Then when you start working, you start to build it together. This then produces a final product. For example, in cases of a building, you'd have a building. Now, for quite a while, many of the projects entail this sort of process of visualization, where you'd have a very clear one vision, you'd have a one singular process that would be irreversible. And the biggest constraint in project management just used to be what are called the triangle of project need, which means you get a scope, like in this case, a road needed to be made. You get a cost of how much money is available, and then you have a time that that thing has to be done in. And what is caught in the middle is the quality that thing will be made under. So, for example, there's a joke I'm told of a minister who went to visit an Asian nation. Then the minister got the guy on a balcony and then he said, "You see that road? I have made 20% of it," which is the vice we fight called corruption. When the minister from India came to Kenya, then the guy was taken to the balcony of the other guy. Then he was shown, "You see that road?" The guy said, "I can't see any road." He's told, "Yes, I took 100% of it." Now we are looking maybe at the Indian road on the second side of the picture. That means because the money was reduced and the scope was not reduced, the tarmac must have been very thin. So that means the quality is heavily compromised. So in project management, you get too many intricacies and complexities. And what has happened over time is project management has become a course which is studied. And among the biggest methodologies of project management has been Prince, currently Prince 2. Now when we move to IT initially adopted the traditional methodology of project management, like building road, building buildings, where you'd get a very clear scope. You're making a payroll, you're making a given fixed target. So your target wasn't, the scope was a clear fixed scope which doesn't change. So for that to happen, you'd have to do your research, you do feasibility study, you do the analysis, you do the design, you do the coding, you do the testing, you do the maintenance, you do the rollout of the project, and you close. There was also a conception that software has to be made, implemented, and that closes. And that was studied, and you had quite a number of people who got to study these. Now, what happened over time is the base of some of the software thinking didn't end up looking like the projects for making roads and for doing buildings. And for let's say manufacturing, the older method of thinking, of assuming that you'd understand what is necessary and be able to get all those things put together, started to break off. The first one we started to break off is, among the oldest softwares I started to use, I still use to date, was I think Windows 2.0. That means I'm slightly old, although I was quite young, which was running on top of DOS 2.0. To date, we are at Windows 10, although we had XP in the middle. I don't know whether X was to be 10, but you can assume how many iterations. So software stopped having a model where it's like a fixed road that it's made and it ends. What also started to then also play is in the new macroeconomic element, we also started to make roads in what we'd call a more slight manner. Instead of designing one road, especially SGR should have borrowed that model, or it still may be borrowing. Instead of thinking, how do we connect Mombasa to Kinshasa and design one end project, we may think, how do we make sections of the train that have the most economic viability, make those sections, but then the bigger vision is still to connect Mombasa to Kinshasa. So because of all a bit of the differences of software evolution and need, biggest one being when the customer sees the solution, let's say a website, they give a lot of feedback, and that feedback needs to be put back into designing a new version. The advent of the mobile phone made this even way a bigger challenge, because we had people giving a lot of feedback. Because of this, there was a change of thinking by quite a number of people. In Agile, the people who started to think were not in software. The people who started to think we can do things differently were the Japanese in car manufacturing. When I introduce Agile in the subsequent introductions, I'll be able to give bigger stories about the Japanese. But in today's introduction, we just needed to understand project management and then be able to know how it evolved towards thinking more in an Agile. And Agile just means being slightly more flexible, not being too stuck up on saying, now we did the coding, so you must have the software in this method. So this way, we still do the same thing. So there was a misconception initially in Agile methodology that we throw away the design, the documentation, everything. No, we don't do that. All it means is we are able to break down. So Agile methodology then means we basically break down a long vision into small iterative products. So you'd be able to do an iterative approach. And the iterative approach means you take a few pointers which can result to a product. You do the review, the design, the coding, the testing, and ensure as much as you can, in every iteration you're able to get an incremental product. So if you're making a website through Agile, you'll not sit and do a whole design, do a whole that. You think what is the most important required thing is a landing page. And what you'd focus on is a landing page. And what you'd ensure on the landing page, you don't have any menus. You just have a landing page which will be informative, that maybe you can scroll, and you do that landing page in, let's say, a month. Once the landing page is done, then you'd say you want to build the contact us pages, but you'd ensure whatever happens increments. Now, when the people start to access the website and bring the landing page, they may give you feedback. That means that in the next sprint, you may need to pick in things that were of the landing page and not even the contact page, because you might find there's some very basic information people just want to know. Then you'd put it on the main landing page, like a few things about the organization. Now, an interesting Agile story is about a given Indian man who fell in love with a beautiful Mzungu in India who'd come to tour. Now, the guy had he had two options. The first option was to raise money. Once he had enough money, he'd then get the plane ticket, make arrangements, and fly to Europe to meet the lady. But he thought that, money has a demand in terms of you have to pay rent, you have to do food. So that means you'll only be saving a portion. That means that project, if he did it that way, may have taken a long time. So the guy decided, because he was an artist, to sell what he had as initial capital and start cycling towards the direction of Europe. And I believe that's a testament to real love. So as he did that, he went doing portraits, and as he went doing portraits, he every day he'd move a couple of miles towards his vision. He'd get some money. His story got popular, and people started to just buy his art to connect to the story. He started to get free car rides. He started to get free train rides, and he got such an acceleration that he got to Europe in even a way faster time. and ended up getting the girl, and he managed to get the girl. The picture on this slide is them old married, and the story was on BBC. Now, towards the topic we are calling Scrum. Now, when we say Scrum, now Scrum would be an Agile framework. So when you look at Agile, Agile has very many frameworks that have been developed. And when we do the more details on the next introduction on Agile and Scrum, we'll see things like extreme programming, we look at Kanban. So there are different frameworks to try and say, we want to do Agile. What framework can we use to ensure that we can get Scrum done, Agile done in a more organized way? So Scrum helps to be able to put the Agile principles in operation in a more clear, teachable ways. Because the Agile, if you even look at the Agile manifesto, and if you look at all the Agile, the principles of Agile, you have, it's a concept. It's like a religion, do good. Scrum is like the Catholic Church, to tell you, Misa ni ya saa hii, this is how you take sacrament, baptism. So Scrum gives a framework, and people need to understand things like frameworks and protocols are agreements of people. They are not fixed. So even on Scrum, when you implement it in organizations, you have quite a bit of flexibility. And Scrum then gives specific things that we must do, which are the things that define Scrum. First one is, once you have a vision, you must break the vision into stories which define the requirements, and you'd have a meeting which defines all the stories that you've gotten. Once you get these stories together, in that meeting, which is called planning, the planning meeting, which will be called sprint planning, you pick which of those stories you want to carry into a thing called a sprint. Now, the sprint defines Scrum, because a sprint is a fixed period. So if you say it's 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, or a week, and in that time, you can only pick things that you must finish. So what you pick in the sprint planning, you have to be able to do a discovery, a design, a development, a testing, a documentation, and try and ensure within that sprint you have a product. And then you'd repeat these every 2 weeks. So you do the sprint planning, you do the sprint, and at the end you'd be able to do a demo to demo what you've done within the sprint. And then the demo, you'd also talk about things like you can do a retro. A retro means you do a retrospective, and these are things we'll continue to explain and introduce. So when you do this way, it means you break down any project into small possibilities that are achievable and clear, and you have a product that you can always show a customer as the product evolves. So you're able to have a clear evolving product. And this is an example of a board you'd use. So within Scrum you have a board. Mostly we try and encourage a whiteboard, which you do sticky notes. This thing called the COVID-19 Corona has really changed Scrum, because it has meant we have to work from home. So it's really forced quite a bit of the whiteboard, the really close communication be moved to tools, and you can see we are trying to do online classes, and we have on this you can see the first part we are calling sprint planning. So within sprint planning, you basically do a product backlog. Basically means any idea you could have had, you write it there. Just keep writing, keep writing. In sprint planning meeting, where you meet, then you'd pick what is on the backlog or any new ideas that you must do within that sprint. Once you keep them there, you break those stories into smaller items that a single person can do, and that to do would be a task that you can be able to do in a day or two. A user story can be done within a sprint, let's say for 2 weeks. A user story should be done within a day and can be picked by a person. Now, the members of the team will come and pick a story one at a time from the to-do and put it in progress. So you're able to know who at any one time is taking in a particular task. Once they finish, they can move it to review for some other person to review it. And then the story can go to done. Now, you'd find within a sprint, the stories would keep moving from the to-do box to the done box. And by the end of sprint, you should be able to demo which user stories on the sprint backlog were completed and can be moved to done. If there are impediments of why some stories can't be moved, they are moved to impediment. So you'd have 3 clear events that would happen. Would be the sprint planning, which is like a 2-hour meeting you plan. There'd be the sprint, which would be like 2 weeks. Within the sprint, there's an event called a stand-up. Stand-up means somebody, it's a meeting held standing up, and you say what I did yesterday, what I am doing today, what impediments I have, and these are things we'll continue to explain. That's why we have an introductory session, which is short, should be around half an hour. Now, the Scrum team consists of a couple of people. We have the people who own the product, that we have what you call the product owner. Then we have the product owner knows about the product, mostly generates quite a bit of the sprint backlog, but ensures they are the ones who okay what the sprint backlog is. Then you have the Scrum Master, who helps the team to do all the Scrum rules and also helps with handling the impediments. Again, we will look at that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that will be the only introduction we'll give for today. These DUC solutions, we do IT consulting, we do software development, support and maintenance, network infrastructure. The main webinar for Scrum, again, will be on the 17th of, I think I'd say 17th of February. That will be a session for around 3 hours from 2 to around 5. And we hope it will be interactive. There'll be people asking questions. The next introductory class will be next Wednesday from 2:30. I think we'd put a notice on the banner we'd written 2. We apologize. It should be at 2:30 for half an hour. With that, ladies and gentlemen, do enjoy your Wednesday ladies night day. Thank you. We hope you'll be with us, and kindly subscribe on our channel for our videos. Thank you very much.